right, well, good afternoon, everyone. We're so pleased that you could join us today at this forum. My name is Christina Bowman, and I work for the Division of Services for Deaf and Hard of Hearing in the Wilmington Regional Center. We serve 12 counties, including Onslow County. Several months ago, I was contacted by both the Jacksonville Police Department as well as Gideon here, a local deaf community member, and they both felt very strongly that there was a need to have an event like we are hosting today, an opportunity for the deaf community to come together and meet some folks from the police community and just have a time to really dialogue and ask questions and share thoughts. So far, it's been a really wonderful experience collaborating with the Jacksonville Police Department and with Gideon. I'm going to go ahead and let Gideon introduce himself now and tell you more about his objectives, and then we'll go ahead and let the panelists introduce themselves.
I'm going to stand so everybody can see me better. I was a student at Campbell University, and when attending Campbell University, I was watching the teacher and what they had to teach, and I saw law enforcement working and their experience, and I happened to find that one of the police officers had a deaf brother, and that is Tim Malfitano. And we went ahead and partnered together from that experience, and he's actually the fourth person from your left, my right, and he is willing to work in partnership with me, and also Sergeant Silence, who I went to church with before, and we are here to work in collaboration. We're here to work in collaboration to enhance communication between the police department and the citizens, to spread awareness. And the community members aren't aware of different issues, and neither is the police department. So we are here today to get to know each other and to have a clear understanding with what they do and with what we're looking for. So thank you for coming out today.
All right, thank you. Who would like to start?
I'll start on the end.
Sergeant Silence.
I'll start.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Dale Silence. I'm a police officer with the Jacksonville Police Department. Just a quick rundown. I'm born and raised here in Jacksonville, true local. I started my career about 15 years ago working for the state of North Carolina, working for alcohol law enforcement. While there, I worked basically undercover operations all over North Carolina, worked in bars and clubs in different places, some areas were high crime rate areas, again, all over the state. Excuse me. After working there for about 5 years, I transferred over to Jacksonville Police Department. This is where I was from. It's where I wanted to be. Worked on patrol for a while, worked for street crimes. Then I went to the Special Operations Division, which mainly work vice crimes to include drug crimes, prostitution, gambling, those types of cases. While I was in the Special Operations Division, I went to the General Instructor School to become an instructor for the state of North Carolina. Also became a member of the tactical team for Jacksonville. I also went to the Firearms Instructor School, where I teach currently for the police department as well as Coastal Carolina Community College. After coming out of the Special Operations Division, I was promoted to the rank of sergeant, where I worked patrol for a couple years. And then I transferred over to the Community Services Division, which is where I currently am assigned.
Okay, thank you.
My turn?
Yes.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lieutenant Richard Kellum. I didn't get started in law enforcement until I was almost 30 years old, but I've been with Jacksonville Police Department since I started in law enforcement, almost 12 years. I just recently was promoted to the rank of lieutenant. Before that, I worked with the Special Operations Division, which he's kind of mentioned already, We actually, Sergeant Silence and I have worked together quite a bit during our career. But started obviously like everybody else on patrol. After initially being on patrol for about a year, I went to what we had at the time called a community response team, which is a kind of a proactive policing unit where we targeted high crime areas in an attempt to reduce crime in those areas. After the community response team, I moved into the Special Operations Division as an investigator, and after being there for a time, I became a criminal investigator, similar to what Detective Smith does, except I tried to stay away from juvenile cases. I worked more larcenies and frauds, even some other robberies, even a homicide or two. After that, I was promoted to sergeant and went back to the patrol division for just a very short period of time, for about 6 months. And after doing that for 6 months, actually Chief Malfitano moved me back to the Special Operations Division as the sergeant of that division, and I was there for pretty much the last 4 years until my recent promotion about a couple months ago. And now I'm back on patrol and back where we get to interact with the public quite a bit. So here I am.
Thank you. My name is Amanda Smith, and I'm currently assigned to the Special Victims Unit, also the Juvenile Division within the Investigative Division at the Police Department. I've been with this division for 2 years. Before that, I spent a year in Community Services underneath of Sergeant Silence, and before that, I did 5 years on patrol. During that time, I've attained my associate's, bachelor's, and master's degree in criminal justice, and just recently started teaching as an instructor at Coastal Carolina Community College.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Good?
We're good.
Very good. I'm glad to hear it. My name's Tim Malfitano, and I'm not from Jacksonville, North Carolina, as you could probably hear. So I started here in 1987 with the police department after getting out of the Marine Corps. I did 4 years in the Marine Corps. I've worked everything, let's say, from patrol to where I am today, which is over several divisions. So I've worked in narcotics. I've worked as a sergeant on it was called the Cops B unit, which was an anti-crime unit. We dealt with guns and people selling drugs on the street. I've worked in hiring people. I've worked in accreditation. I've worked in a little bit in community services. I was the city's first school resource officer working in schools, and been promoted up through the ranks to the current rank of Public Services Deputy Director. I've had a great career, but it's not about my career, what I've done. It's about what I've learned. It's about the things I've learned in dealing with people and what's important to people and how we can make their lives better. And that's everybody. And I'll kind of go into our little motto that we have, where we, the members of the Jacksonville Police Department, and that means all of us, civilians and sworn law enforcement, are committed through teamwork with our citizens to providing a safe community for everyone, treating everybody fairly, and making sure that everybody has a voice with us. And that's why we thought it was important today to do this, because I've had a deaf brother for my entire life, and I've never learned sign language, never ever. I never had to, because he could read my lips really well growing up with him. So I never had to do it. And I never thought when I became a police officer that I'd have to do it. But I realized in working with Gideon in college, because I'm an instructor for several colleges, that it is very important that you lose that communication by not knowing that. 90% of our communication is nonverbals, right? The way we look at each other, the way we smile, we interact, and that's important. So that's why we're here today. That's why I got involved in law enforcement, was to do that very thing, to make people's lives better than when I find them. And that's important to us. So I thank you for coming. It's a pleasure and an honor to meet you and to be with you. Thank you.
Just gonna wait one moment. Catch up. That was a lot. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeffrey McAllister. I'm the Communications Supervisor at the Jacksonville Public Safety. Been a communicator for 911 for about 12 years now. The former paramedic, former firefighter. Got into the 911 business about 12 years ago. Started off as a, actually as a dare. And got into it, and I have fell in love with it and have been promoted through the ranks from just a telecommunicator to a trainer to the supervisor at the Jacksonville Public Safety. Basically, we handle all the calls that come into Jacksonville, whether they're emergency or non-emergency. We dispatch the police and fire for the city of Jacksonville. And that's about all I have for you right now.
How's everybody doing? I'm Corporal Timothy Sawyer. I'm actually assigned right now as a school resource officer at Jacksonville High School. So I am basically keeping about 1,300 kids safe there. I don't know if any of you guys have kids that go there, but you'll see my lovely face there on a daily basis. Before that, I was a community officer, which I dealt with the citizens of Jacksonville basically every day. We would put out small fires within complaints. So if you had a complaint that you would call into the police department and a patrol officer didn't have a whole lot of time to come speak with you, they would send out one of the 4 community officers, and we would have a lot of time to sit down and figure out a solution to the issue or to the problems. And before that, I did 3 years on patrol where, we dealt with the citizens a lot too. But you mostly spent time answering calls for service and taking reports. So we didn't have a whole lot of time to stay and speak with citizens. So that's when they developed the community services program.
Thank you very much. All right. So now we're going to start this first portion of the program. Gideon is going to lead the discussion with questions that he's been collecting from community members over the last several weeks. Following that, we'll have about a 10-minute break. And when we come back, then the floor will be open for questions, and we'll let you know how we're going to orchestrate that. Okay.
Okay, the first opening question that we would like to ask of the panelist. What is the standard goal or motto of the Jacksonville Police Department? To provide clear communication to the deaf population.
I'll take that one. So, as I said in our opening remarks, is that what we do is, through teamwork with our citizens, we are committed to providing a safe community, whatever that takes. So we've taken several steps to mingle with our community on different levels. Some of those things we do, and I'll have to talk on Sergeant Silas's behalf here, is we do what's called the Citizens Police Academy. We do that once a year. That's when we invite citizens in to take part in a several-week academy, 1 day a week, and they learn what police officers do. So they can see how we're trained, and they can see how we react to certain things that take place in the community. And we feel that's very important because the media, sometimes they tend to not tell you enough, not show the people enough. They show just enough to get a couple of seconds on the air. So we like to let the citizens know exactly what it is that we do and why it is that we do it.
Anyone else want to add anything to that?
Yeah.
This is Gideon. Thank you.
Just to expand a little bit, I mean, breaking it down, it's an opportunity to see behind the curtain, to come into the police department and see what's going on in our day-to-day life. And it may not be as exciting as you hope it would be, but it is an opportunity to see behind the curtain and see what we do on a daily basis. And some of the training and things that you would receive are similar to some of the things that officers receive.
This is Gideon. Wonderful. Thank you. I'm wondering about with the police department, do you use 24-hour interpreting services through an interpreting agency if you need to utilize a sign language interpreter?
We do not have a 24-hour service. Now, I know most of our calls from the community will come through Relay, North Carolina. Our telephones are, they're automatically set up for TTY. It recognizes the system will automatically recognize it and will convert our screen to it to where we can communicate effectively. We do have 2 on staff that sign fluently. So we are ready for if there's any, as of right now, we do not have any type of video services, but we are prepared for it.
And that's a great point that Jeff makes, is that I see the next question here, Gideon, I see your next question, when would it be necessary to have an interpreter? There would be several occasions. Officers out in the street that are dealing with a serious situation with somebody who they can't communicate with, we would need to have an interpreter. And currently, we don't have that, the person that could come out there. Now, if we had a communicator working that does sign, we could ask that they come out to that scene and help us with that. But currently, we don't. We're going to look at ways to fix that, to where we could have somebody that could actually interpret on the spot when we need it right then and there, out in the field. So when you call 911, you can use the TTY system, and they'll be able to communicate with you perfect. But if we don't have that availability out in the field, it's going to be rather difficult. So those are one of the things we want to be able to overcome, is to get that done.
Okay, in a situation of a pullover, how could you identify, or just out in the community, is there a way that you could identify that a person is deaf?
That's actually a good question. There's a current bill that passed, I believe it was in July of this year. It was called House Bill 84. Excuse me. This bill allowed deaf folks from the community to actually link that to their vehicle registration and or their driver's license. So in the event a vehicle stop was conducted on someone that was deaf, we would have some a way to understand. We would need some type of interpreter prior to making contact, or in the event the individual was not responding or was not following directions, we would understand the reasoning why.
I think to add to what Sergeant Silence is saying, I think that the House bill that passed, it's going to use a system that we already have that does alerts for officers. So my patrol officers, when we stop a car, when basically they run, everybody has a computer in the car, and when they check those driver's license or the registration plates that's on the car, it will give them alerts if that person has a concealed handgun permit. It will let them know if that person has an outstanding warrant. It can let them know other things about the person just based on the information from the registration plate. So the House bill is going to be a voluntary thing, I believe. So it would be up to you to contact the state and ask that be added if you choose to do so. It's a voluntary thing that you can have that alert for law enforcement. So if we do run your registration plate, it would show that that you're deaf, or that you would have some kind of contact that it would change the situation with law enforcement. Like it would notify us that you are deaf.
And also, this attachment to the registration is done for safety purposes only. It's not done for any other form of documentation or recording. It's only done to alert officers in the event they make contact with you. They'll know ahead of time why there's no communication between you and the individual making contact with.
And this is Christina. I just also want to say that the law was, passed, but it won't become active until 2018. So some of you may not have heard a lot about it yet because it's not active yet. And our division will certainly be sharing information with the community on, how to do, what to do, and all of that. I think the DMV is still working through all their process to make sure everything is in place and ready to be implemented. So if you're interested, you all can stay tuned for that, for more information about that.
This is Gideon. Great. Thank you. Let's say you don't have access to notify you that that individual is deaf. What is the best way to perhaps have the deaf person let you know that they're deaf, or how you could approach that person and see how they would respond to your question? How's the best way you could communicate with a deaf person to identify first and foremost that they're deaf, or they could let you know that they're deaf?
So I would turn that back actually to you, because how do you let somebody know that you're deaf right now? Because whatever sign you use, that's what we need to learn. So if we come up to your car and you look at us and make that sign, we know that. So it's something that you do already that's natural to you, that we would learn.
This is Gideon. If you don't mind, I would like to include audience participation, and I would just like the audience, if you happen to interact with a person who is hearing, what is the first thing you do to notify them? You point at your ears and say you can't hear? What does somebody else do for a gesture? Like tapping on the side of your ear, just pointing at your ear and saying can't hear? Someone else, writing, can't point at your ear, and then go ahead and pull out a pen and paper, and that's how we would probably identify that we are deaf. So do you guys have any other suggestions on how you would interact with a deaf person to identify that they're deaf?
I was going to say, when I watch him and he tells him that's what he does, he points at his ear. He just points at his ear, and they know right away. They know what that is. Now, that's got to be taught to police officers, right? And I heard that you mentioned pulling out a pad and pen to write, which is a great idea. But we would probably ask that we would wait to have some communication before you went to get that pad and pen out. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'd just like to ask a general question. The question is, let's say 911 was called and they have to dispatch 911. Who would be coming out to the scene? Would it be a police officer or a sheriff? And can you elaborate on the difference between a police officer and a sheriff?
Police officer, it's basically a jurisdiction issue. So if you live in a city or a town and your city or town has law enforcement or has a city law enforcement, then that's who's going to respond. If you live outside the city, as I do, being a Kellum, I'm local like the Silences. I live out in the county. If I call 911 from my house, a sheriff's deputy will come out to my house. If you live in the town of Richlands, in the actual town, the town of Richlands police would come out to you. Here in the city of Jacksonville, we're going to come out. And so it's basically a jurisdiction issue. There are a few other things that the sheriff may have responsibility for outside of the normal 911 calls, which is, I think, what your question was. But in addition to that, a sheriff's office would have some other civil duties, and this sheriff of the county is responsible for maintaining the jail, and security for the courts in that county, as well as most of your civil paper service. So those are some of the differences. The city, we don't typically deal with the court system as far as the security. The jail is completely under the sheriff's jurisdiction, and typical warrant and civil warrant service. So if you were to have someone sued or some kind of other civil service done, that it will be done by the sheriff's office.
I have a follow-up question, twofold. Do you know how many police departments are within Onslow County, individual police departments? And then do the police departments sometimes work collaboratively with the sheriff's office? Do they support each other?
I was just going to get to that, if I can. So, I did want to expand on that, only because there would be situations where if you were right outside the city limits and the sheriff's deputy was not available, which can happen, we would respond to that, and we have done that before, that you may have a police officer come out into the county depending how far. But a 911 call to us is a 911 call. And we work collaboratively with the sheriff's office. And they understand that, and they do, and that's why, even in the city, and I'm going back to the question that was asked, suppose I call 911 for help, and that's the key. So who's ever closer, we monitor each other's radios, the sheriff's office, the police department, highway patrol monitors our radio. So if there was an officer right there and heard that 911 call go out, they're not just going to drive by, they're going to respond there, okay, because that's what we do. Going back to your first part of your question, how many agencies are there in Onslow County? Police agencies. So you have Topsail Beach, North Topsail Beach, Surf City, Holly Ridge, Swansboro, JPD, and the Sheriff's Office.
Richlands.
And Richlands PD. So you have 8 agencies. So you have 7 municipalities and 1 sheriff's office.
Not to mention the PMO, NCIS.
Right. For other agencies that we have that aren't patrol orientated within the city, you have the military police on base, right? They have NCIS, the Naval Investigative Service. And then within Onslow County, you have other agencies that tend to work around here, like alcohol law enforcement, the FBI, ATF, DEA. So those agencies are all within the county doing different things.
This is Gideon. Great. Thank you. Okay, we spoke of private matter, private property, but now moving along to public environments and areas, that's a huge concern, the citizens and their safety. So let's envision an area like let's say you have a night out or you go to a Jacksonville football game and there's a large amount of individuals there. What are some good strategies a deaf person could use to enhance his or her awareness of the environment and their safety and engage that environment before and during and after a violent attack? So what can they do to prepare themselves in settings like that?
That's a great question.
I would almost venture to say that you guys are probably better at reading nonverbal cues than we are. I spent time as an investigator. That's one of the most important things when you're doing an interview or an interrogation, is to try to key in on those nonverbal cues. Some of the things that you will see that would lead you to believe someone is lying or providing hiding something, things like that. I would probably say that everybody in this room is probably better than I am at reading those nonverbal cues, and I think I'm pretty good at it. So that may be something that you could key in on, whereas if you're not able to hear those things, the violent acts or commands or screaming and yelling, you may be able to see people getting into, or see people who are, and key in on people who are up to no good, to use a term, and probably be better at it than we are. That may be something to help you with that.
I think doing this right here is the start for that, what we're doing here. Because if you have, and I want to say, is he referring to the acts that have been going on around the country? The violent acts that took place in Nevada, are you talking about that?
This is Gideon. Yes, just related. If it were so to happen, let's say the incident that happened or transpired in Las Vegas, then we would know what to do and how to prepare ourselves for a violent attack.
So we would hope that if we were having a large event like that, we would control that environment to make it as safe as possible for everybody. Making sure that the venue is secure, both from outside, from where the football game or the concert or something, whatever it might be, a festival, making sure that we control that safety-wise. Now, of course, you can't be perfect on everything, but we would make people aware of any threats or any violence that could occur. But we do our best to make sure those things do not happen. That's what we're in the business of, right?
If I could add a couple things to that, the general overall safety rules apply, I think, to everyone. Being aware of your surroundings when you go out, try not to have your face buried in your phone, looking on Facebook or texting or whatever it may be. Make sure your head is up and you're aware of who's around you, what's going on around you, and just being safe in that manner to begin with every day, in spite of what event you may be attending.
To follow up with that, just, Corporal Sawyer, what, I guess thinking about, there have been incidents that sometimes occur in schools. I mean, has the way that Jacksonville Police Department deals with like school resource officers changed in the last years, or anything you can add to that generally?
It hasn't really changed. It's basically we have our deaf population in the schools are in one class, and they have several assistants in that class to help out. So in an event of a tragedy or an incident happening at the school, they have certain people that are assigned to tell them what is going on and where to go from there. And I would also add, just never forget your gut instinct. Everybody has it. If you don't feel comfortable in a situation, then act appropriately.
This is Gideon. Thank you for your answers. I really appreciate that. Now, speaking of community policing, the program, how can deaf individuals contribute to that? Because yesterday we had an incident of an inmate who fled the facilities or the grounds at the correctional facility. So how could we help if we have an opportunity to help in that situation?
Certainly, I would say the first step, as Chief mentioned earlier, the Citizens Police Academy, I would say start by educating yourself. Become an active member of our community, and we encourage that through not only the Citizens Academy, but events like this where we can you can help educate us, and we can in turn maybe share some information. Now, the event yesterday, that's a random act, and it doesn't happen often, but when it does, there are several news sources. I don't know that we have a way other than the news media to put that information out immediately. Normally, it's our focus is on getting that guy back into custody immediately. So then the media, I think, is pretty much left to the dispensing the information.
I have a follow-up to that. So we sent it out by something that goes by phone. One thing I'm not educated on is if we send it out, TTY, if we send it out so the deaf community can get it on their phone somehow, some way, an alert. Does any of you have anything like that? That if a TTY message is sent out, do you get it any way, shape, or form? Is there any way to get that? I know you have to usually have your phone on a machine, but there is something that maybe we don't know that we could put it out that way.
Almost adding a text
A
component.
text component, right?
Now, we do have a software, and Jeff, you may be able to speak on it, to where we can kind of almost use a geofence and kind of get information out to certain communities during certain events or
With the
certain
Connect
crimes.
CTY, we can actually do certain areas, certain groups. We can set it up to where it's just certain mobiles, certain residences with the Connect CTY. To add to that, I mean, I know most everybody, you were speaking of the incident yesterday, I'm sure most everybody got it through an alert through a telephone. A couple of the things that we do offer, you can do the text to tip through Crime Stoppers, which that comes in immediately to several of us that Detective Smith is over. We do get that in communications as soon as it is sent. I know we are in the process of looking at a phone app for our agency that will actually, that you can add to your smartphone to where it will actually come to us on a 24-hour basis. So if you have any type of, anything you need to relay to us, it will actually have a place to report suspicious incidences in this phone app and crimes and stuff like that. And like I said, of course, we do have the TTY available. So, if like in the incident yesterday, if you were actually to see that, by all means, use your TTY. We can communicate that way. And then, like I said, there's Relay North Carolina that we deal with on a regular basis as well. We're all trained on that as well. And to go back to, the call in reference to people, the officers responding out, there has been several incidences where we've actually, because like I said, I told you, I have 2 communicators that sign fluently, that we have actually sent out those communicators with the officers. I think there's probably been about 4 incidences in the last 2 years that we've actually sent the communicator right out with the officer, so that way they were able to communicate. The officer was able to communicate with that person.
Chief, I noticed quite a few heads shaking.
I know, and I see that they didn't get that message yesterday. They didn't get that at all, and that's a concern for me. And does Connect CTY allow the deaf community to give us a number? When they give us some number, can we communicate with them specifically?
We can send it as a text message.
As a text message. So what would be important is to sign up for that, Connect CTY, so we can then send you messages. So when we send out, like for instance, yesterday, they were on Country Club Road by the mall. Everybody in that area got a message that they were looking for that inmate. So we want to make sure that everyone gets that message. So they call, is it the city? Call the city of Jacksonville, ask for media services, and they can link you with Connect CTY. Of course, is there a form that we could give them they could actually fill out and we could do that for them?
To share with him, because I think he was.
I'll have to talk to Mr. Hargett, Len Hargett, and see what way we could do that. Can they? Okay,
Excellent.
good, even better. Ally said you could sign up online.
This is Christina. So I know emergency management has a system called Code Red, right?
Right.
So, but you have something specific for law enforcement awareness, correct? That people
Right,
can sign up
Connect
for a
CTY.
call or a text? Okay.
Yes.
So they go to your website and should be able to find it there
Yes,
somewhere.
Connect CTY.
Again, just that he's got brochures out there.
See, I knew we had it, so that's
Pass
why.
out.
We're going to pass out brochures to you, so you have the information on how to do it.
This is Gideon. You mentioned TTYs. And if you don't mind, let me ask the audience, how many individuals still use TTYs in the audience?
Nobody, right?
And a lot of people are responding a video phone. If you use a TTY, raise your hand.
Oh, wow.
TTYs are pretty much
Out.
obsolete.
They're
That's
gone.
old technology. Yes, they're gone. But we still, they're still officially recognized nationally, but they're very outdated. So mostly we utilize the relay service, a video phone, and call through a sign language interpreter. So for information, often we receive information via text message. And that's the kind of communication that we utilize, or our video phone. Again, TTYs are outdated and
Yes,
obsolete.
yes. Thank you.
That's why we need to be here.
Yes, right.
And some of the audience members are saying amen.
That's right. That's why we're here.
Yep.
Okay, last question. You mentioned text messaging. With recent technology, I know there's been some discussion already, but text to 911, I know that you can do it via TTY, but is text to 911 available in this area that
It
you know
is,
of?
you've got two carriers that are very fluid in it right now, and that's Sprint and AT&T. And I know Verizon is coming on board and T-Mobile. Verizon is still in just certain areas, your larger cities. I'll have to check to see if it's available here in our area as of right now. We do have that service available. It is built directly into our phone. It kind of works very similar to the TTY. It would automatically detect it and pop it up on our phone that it is a text to 911 phone call, and we're able to respond back to it. But like I said, as of right now, I know Sprint and AT&T are definitely on board because we've gotten several of those over the last couple of months.
This is getting great. Thank you. Just an additional question. The Jacksonville Police Department, I know that everything is always evolving, and the nature of the crimes are also, and people's behavior. I'm just curious of your opinion, what is the biggest issue that you face on a daily basis at this moment?
Wow. So there's actually not one, there's a couple. There's a few. Probably one of the biggest things we're trying to combat right now, and not in a law enforcement rigid way where you put people in jail all the time, is the opioid epidemic, the heroin epidemic, where people are addicted to heroin or they're addicted to opiates. And we're losing lives because of that, because we can't be everywhere at one time. So we are, I'll use the word feverishly, meaning we are passionate about getting out there and helping people and getting the word out. Because when somebody's addicted to a drug, it's not about putting them in jail. It's about getting them the help they need so they can recover. And that goes for anybody, alcoholism, whatever it may be. We have to be able to help them, otherwise we're going to keep losing lives. So that's one of our biggest endeavors right now, is to deal with that situation. On top of that, it's keeping people safe all the time, trying to make sure you're in every community and making sure that we have enough police officers and enough staff to address traffic concerns. Anybody who drives around Jacksonville knows we can have some traffic concerns, okay? It's the holiday season, right? There's a lot of people out. Unfortunately, we have people out there who are going to commit crimes and take advantage of other people. We want to make sure we're around to prevent that from happening. So there's a multitude of things that we're involved in all the time. Anybody want to add to that?
Bridging the gap with the medical community for mental health,
Right.
I think, is another thing that we as an agency have been working towards. I would definitely support the chief with the opioid epidemic, and that's not a Jacksonville or an Onzo County issue. That's a nationwide issue. Again, working with the medical community on that as well.
And just for some clarification, can you explain what you mean by opioids? I think some people might not be as familiar. I'm
Gotcha.
sure you deal with it on a daily basis, but what exactly what kind of drugs is that and what?
So opioids encompass any pain medication, Percocet, oxycodone, right?
Fentanyl.
Things you get, right. Anything that takes away your pain, a strong narcotic, not Tylenol, not ibuprofen, okay? Those very strong narcotics that have to be prescribed.
Highly addictive, which they're great for what they treat, but they are very addictive. And in my experience working in the narcotics units and as a law enforcement officer, I've seen over the course of the last 7 years, many people who became addicted to painkillers, even our troops coming back from the wars, and many different things, but they became addicted over heavy use of painkillers. And some of those people that I was dealing with in 2010 are now using heroin, which is actually cheaper than your prescription pills. But many of those addictions started with the painkillers. So when we discuss opioids, that's what we're referring to. One of the ways the community, Chief.
No, good.
One of the ways that community can help, we have a pill drop. I think that's one of the things that you guys cover. I grew up, again, as a Southern boy, and I know my family, if we got some antibiotics and there was any left, they kept it for the next time they needed it, or in case one of the dogs needed it or something like that, right? Well, you can't do that anymore because those pills that are left in our medicine cabinets can be accessed by anybody else. Our children, our children's friends, our cousins, our brothers, our uncles, who will come over, and if they have access to those pills, they can become addicted. So we need to, I encourage you guys, if once you've used what your doctor and you no longer need those drugs, turn them into the pill drop. Get them off the street. Keep them from going to the street.
I'd like to add to that. And they probably, I'm sure that it wasn't put out there, or you may not know, but last Tuesday night, we started a 3-part opioid forum to where you can come to the police department this Tuesday at 6 p.m., and it's from 6 to 7:30, and they're going to be discussing the opioid crisis in our community and what we're trying to do to make it better. So it started last Tuesday. So we have another one this Tuesday from 6 to 7:30 or 6 to 8. And then next Tuesday, same time. It's a 3-part series. And I invite all of you to come. We'll just need a couple of interpreters to do that for us, of course. But I invite you to come to that because it's very educational. So you can see what actually is going on in our community and how we're trying to work through this epidemic that we have. Because it's affecting everybody from 13 years old up until their more mature years, 60, 65 years old. It's affecting everybody. Okay?
And
If I can add to that real quick.
Okay.
There's also a portion of that form that not only is to educate you about opiates, but also as parents, what to look for in kids.
Right.
It's a broad look at it. So it's not just a group of information just kind of thrown at you. And there's also a resource fair on the last day where there'll be more brochures, people you can talk to afterwards to kind of, answer some questions more one-on-one.
you mentioned pill drop. Is that where you have events every so often and people can come, or is it like an everyday you can, what is that?
Every day. You want to talk to that?
Certainly. There's actually Operation Medicine Drop. We do larger events several times a year. However, that box can be, you can get to that box at any time during the day. It's actually in the front door of the police department. It's a big white box. You can go put anything in there. We do ask that you not put liquids in there, and also any types of sharps. But anything else you want to bring in, certainly you can put it in there and we'll take care of it. No, you good, buddy.
We're almost ready for the break. I think Gideon just has a few more questions.
Yes, this is Gideon, if we could hold on one moment. Okay, personally, and the audience may not be aware of this, but I've seen some discussion regarding the all points bulletin list, and I'm just wondering, what is the all points bulletin list, and what should people know about that?
All points bulletin. I'm a little bit at a loss. I'm thinking we're referring to our BOLO list.
Are we talking to a be on the lookout for?
So I almost wonder if this is a movie crossover, all points bulletin list. Can you expand a little bit?
Yes, this is Gideon. From what I'm thinking of, maybe criminals or someone who has a history, like a watch list for that specific person. Is there a watch list that we can be aware, or what areas they're located in, to keep an eye out? It could be our neighbor, perhaps. Maybe we need to know about them. So I could keep myself and also my family safe.
So, if I can, I don't think that there's no list like what you're referring to. There's many arrest records are public record. Those are things that can be accessed through newspapers and things like that. Those are public records. Also, there's North Carolina has a sex offender registry. That is something that is a list of persons. That can also be accessed through most of your newspapers, and I believe the state has a site where you can go and access that.
If I can add to that, can I add to that? There's actually an app you can get for your phone. It's called Offender Locator. You put that on your phone, on your smartphone. You get it through the App Store. And that lists every registered offender, sex offender, wherever you are. So if you travel to another place, another city, you can actually put where you are, and it will show you the offenders around you. It tells you shows a picture, tells you what they were arrested for, and where they live.
This is Gideon. Great. Thank you. I believe that's all the questions that we had.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions before we break, or any comments?
Well, before we have comments from the audience, is there any other things that any of you on the panel want to say or talk about? Any topics before we break? And of course, we'll come back.
I have concerns, and I guess I don't want to do it before the break.
Okay.
I think I'd like to do it after, because it's more scenario-based on things that could go wrong for us that I'd rather discuss when we have just a little bit more time. I don't want to stop them from getting something to eat or taking a break or...
Great.
If I can add something to
This is
your
getting
app,
great.
your app that you said, there's also one out there. It's a very good app. It's called Mobile Patrol. You could download that from the App Store, and it actually shows a picture and also what they did and gives the address. So it could be, so you can look and see if it's maybe a neighbor or something. So that's also a great app, Mobile Patrol.
And these are all private apps, not,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
This is getting great. All right, let's go ahead. Make sure you guys get your apps downloaded so you have those on your mobile devices.
And so we'll go ahead and take a break, and let's be ready to start back in about 10 minutes at 4:15.
This is Gideon. I think we're going to open up the floor for the audience, just any general questions. If you would like to ask a question, please come to the front, to my left, and ask your questions, so that way the sign language interpreter can see you.
Wait, oh. Gideon, do you want people to kind of come up and line up, or do you want people to raise their hand and then you can recognize them and have them come up?
This is Gideon. I'll
Okay.
just recognize
Great.
that individual to come up and make their comment or question. Okay, yes, I know someone has their hand up. Yes, come on up to the front. Yes, hello, this is Juan Hernandez. I live in Wilmington. I've been there for about a year and 6 months. I moved from New Hampshire. I know that several of the cities have police officers, and they're very intelligent, and they know what to do in those specific cities. Although there is a communication barrier between us and the police officers to communicate. Back in July, on July 7th, my moped was actually stolen. I came outside and my moped was gone, so I called the police station from the video phone, and I indicated to them that my moped had been stolen, and they asked for additional information, and we were able to communicate through the video phone, through the relay interpreter. It was probably only that 2 or 3 minutes down the road, that individual had stolen my moped and headed out. So they asked additional questions, and again, we were able to communicate through the video relay sign language interpreter. And my English, just FYI, is it's not my native language, so I'm not real proficient in English, and writing back and forth would not provide effective communication for us. So. Actually, the incident transpired on site. The officer came out, and then it was my idea to go ahead and call through my video phone to provide that access for communication. But the video relay service would not allow us to communicate through the interpreter because we were in the same location. And so we had a hard time communicating. I had a hard time letting the officer know what had transpired. If we could have communicated quickly, that could have been done by a live interpreter, and we could have probably apprehended that individual before they got away. So communication access or communication barriers do exist, and I was trying to figure out how to file that police report on the individual who had taken my moped. The officer had a hard time calling the theft in. So I just wanted to make you aware of my situation.
Thank you very much.
This is Gideon. Great. Thank you. That's a good point he had brought up, which was regarding a sign language interpreter. Like we had just mentioned, asking if you have an agency on standby, so that way you could contact the agency and obtain a sign language interpreter in case of a crisis. So it would be good to have an agency on standby if you need to utilize an interpreter to be on site. We could actually provide that information for you as well. If it so happened that someone was pulled over and that they get someone who can sign pretty well and accompany that police officer to communicate, I kind of want to caution you probably not to do that, because according to the law, we have to have a certified licensed interpreter. If I am communicating directly to another deaf individual and I can sign, that's fine. But when there's another person and that other communicator that you have with you is relaying that information, that's a sticky situation. So a certified sign language interpreter would be required.
And yes, I was talking with Allie a minute ago, before she left, I think she left, and she told me that the legal part of that is that she cannot come out on a traffic stop and do that. Now, if they just came into the police department and had a question about something to do with administration or a form, yes, she could. But when it comes to actually being in the field and giving information like that, they're not allowed to do that unless they are certified to do it. Thank you for bringing that up.
This is Gideon, fantastic. Great,
Can
great.
I add something to that?
Yes, sir.
I've actually discussed that same issue with Christina a while back, and from what I understand, I think there's only one or two, I think in North Carolina or Eastern North Carolina, that are certified as far as the court is concerned. Is that correct?
From my understanding, unless that has changed between now and a year and a half ago, for interpreters in the room, or perhaps Gideon might know more, but interpreters that have the certification specific to a legal certification to where they can interpret in court. And I believe if you're working with someone and it's gonna go to court, in those situations, there are not that many in North Carolina. So depending on the situation in which a law enforcement officer would be communicating with an individual may depend on what kind of interpreter you would want to be looking at hiring and working with. And that's certainly something that our division can, at a future time, set up a meeting to kind of go over some of that information. It's a lot. But we can send Jamie to you, and she can go over some of that. But yeah, that's correct. There are not a lot of legally certified interpreters in North Carolina.
I think it would be important for a forensic interview.
Yep.
I know that we do have a resource to where we do have phone numbers that we can call for interpreters. Now, from hearing what you're telling me now, I didn't realize there was, levels of certification that they had to have. Now, I don't know, this is a county-generated form that we have for these numbers. I don't know if they're registered through our county, as far as using them. Like I said, we'd have to probably have y'all come over and kind of go through these people that, because like I said, I think there's like 4 of them listed to where we can call, but it's during business hours, it's not, so.
From DSDHH, we could definitely, sit down at a different time and have just like a consultative meeting and explain things and show you resources and see what it is that you have currently.
This is Gideon, great. Are there any additional questions from the audience members? Yes. Would it be okay if he just stays on that side of the room to see him?
Mm-hmm. No.
Oh, this is Gideon, that's correct. We'll need you to come to this side of the room for TV purposes. My apologies. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is John Murphy, and I live here in Jacksonville on Highway 53. One morning, while driving, I looked at the rearview mirror, and there was a guy that was unintentionally, or not paying attention. He was talking to his kid and rear-ended me. And then I saw ahead of me there was an Onslow police officer, and I tried to flag them down, and they said, yeah, I'll call someone, or he gestured, and I thought they were going to come and stop. Then a few minutes later, the Jacksonville police drove by. They said, yeah, we'll be back to this stop. And I waited for about 8 minutes looking around, expecting somebody, and then the guy behind me was on the phone and was getting help from somebody. I kind of thought to myself, I don't really know why somebody's not coming. And then finally, a highway patrolman stopped by, handed me the paperwork to write, and I could write and communicate. And he said, what accident was reported? And I was very confused, and I didn't understand why the Jacksonville police and the Onslow County police weren't able to stop by and help, or at least do something with a report. I had to wait for a highway patrolman to respond. And I saw two drive right by.
If I can actually speak to that. First of all, I'm guessing that your crash took place in the county and outside of the city limits.
Yes, on Highway 53, on southwest, on the southwest portion of Highway 53.
Okay. Well, Jacksonville Police Department, we actually report our own crashes, and we investigate our own crashes, meaning we will come to the crash, document the crash, draw a diagram of the crash, and report that so the insurance companies and whatnot can have that information. The sheriff's office, as of this moment, does not report crashes. That is why if you live in the county and not in the city, the Highway Patrol actually has to respond and take those crash reports. And there are times where there may only be 1 or 2 troopers working for all of Onslow County. So that is probably why it took that time frame for that trooper to respond and take the crash report.
Thank you for that. I did have an additional question. I live on Highway 53, and then 264 intersects that. And there are oftentimes frequent accidents at that major intersection. Sometimes when I'm driving along, I see that I'm indicated to go, and it's a green light, and the other 2 cars are not moving from the other directions. And I couldn't hear sirens coming by. Let's say if it's the police department, or let's say it's an ambulance or a fire department. I'm trying to look each way to see where it's coming from, because on that specific route, it's hard to see around the corner. And it's just a recommendation. It would be easier for me when the traffic light, you have the red, yellow, and green. If we just had something that said or indicated to us, don't move, just stop, there's an emergency or an emergency responder coming by. So that would be very helpful if we could indicate on the traffic lights. And a lot of your young people, they love to crank up the music and listen to their music, and they're not paying attention to emergency personnel coming through as well. So it would help them as well, in turn help us. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Certainly.
I can add to that. I know our fire department does have the ability to control our lights with their emergency response. I know Onslow County EMS is actually slowly purchasing them for their ambulances at this point in time. Base is also doing, again, Lejeune is also doing the same thing for their fire responders. As far as officers, I don't know if it's something.
I'm sorry. Can you explain what you mean about that? I'm familiar with it, but about what you mean by change the lights?
The fire trucks and the ambulances, they basically have a signal built into the grill of their vehicle, and as they're approaching a traffic signal, what it will do will change that traffic signal to where it gives them the green light and stops all of the traffic from the other 3 directions. So that way, they can proceed through the intersection safely. Like I said, I know our fire department does have that capability. Of course, the intersection he's speaking of, being outside of the city, I'm not sure. I mean, if we were responding, it would still work because the lights had the capability. But, you've got volunteers out there. So, and I don't know where their fire department is as far as that is purchasing those. I know like I said, EMS is actually in a process of purchasing the service for the ambulances.
This is Gideon. Is there another question from the audience member? Okay, come to the front, please.
Yeah, you did.
A lot of times we're not able to know that someone is behind us and they are pulling us over, or let's say an emergency personnel are coming behind us. It would be nice if we had something, maybe a horn that would just blare really loud or cause some kind of vibration that would, like a bass, something with a deep bass that could reverberate through our vehicle or whatever, so we would know that someone's behind us.
If I can actually add to that real quick, we do have some of the newer EMS. I don't think fire's got there yet, but EMS does have a device that does have a vibration to it, and it's designed more for larger cities because the vibration kind of works in and out of the larger buildings, and you can feel it instead of just hearing it. However, I think there's only a couple of those around, and they don't really work well here because we don't have the large buildings and skyscrapers, so it doesn't have the same effect for the notification. Now, and to add to that, there is a requirement for a minimum decibel meter. That those sirens have to be a certain volume in order for them to be used in emergency services.
This is Gideon. Okay, I see. Okay, from my understanding of his question, are you allowed to, if you're pulling over someone, it's a pull over stop, are they allowed to blare the horn at you to get your attention to pull over, or is that not allowed per law?
It's actually, I'm sorry, go ahead, LZ.
No, you're fine.
It's actually required. The law requires emergency equipment to be used, and that is both our lights, flashing lights, as well as the siren. So both are required for a traffic stop.
This is Gideon. Great. Okay, does that answer your question? Okay, I think we have a question over here. Yes, if you could come to the front.
Hi, I live in Duplin County, Duplin, North Carolina. My name is Mike Pate. And when I'm going to the store, buying, whatever from a convenience store, somebody robbed me while I was there. And they stole everything out of my car. And I was in the store and I didn't even hear that happen. Someone else had gotten robbed. I didn't even hear what was happening. Didn't even hear the whole situation. I couldn't hear a thing happening while we were being robbed. So is there an indicator?
This is Gideon. So did you draw attention to yourself, or was attention drawn elsewhere?
I didn't have any idea that the store was being robbed, that anybody was being robbed. While I was getting drinks and things, for myself from the convenience store, I was deaf, had no idea this was happening.
This is Gideon. So what are you wanting to know from the panelist?
I'm not really sure. I guess there are some people who are fortunate who are in that situation, others aren't.
And this is Gideon. So you're saying if this would have actually transpired and you were diagnosed or not diagnosed, if you were misplaced maybe in that situation, what could you do? So if they misidentify, and we're getting clarification. So if he's in the store and there's another individual in the store, the robber, and someone comes in to rob the cashier. Police officers come to the scene, and those two individuals, himself being deaf, and that other person who was robbing the convenience store, how would they know, and they accused him, the deaf person, of the robbery, not realizing that it was another person, and they misidentified the robber, how could they communicate with him to clear up the situation?
The mic is not connecting.
Testing.
Okay, good, thank you.
I-
Okay.
I think I can speak a little bit to it. So, speaking just a little bit to it, I think that in addition to, I think this could happen to anybody. And not to be funny, but I think we've responded to robberies of gas stations, convenience stores, where there was customers who had no idea what was going on in the store at the time. So that is one consideration, but I think some of that goes to what Sergeant Silence said earlier. All of us can be more aware of our situation. Like Sergeant Silence mentioned, walking around, being lost in your cell phone and not paying attention to what's going on. But it just being aware of your environment and what's going on. That situational awareness is I think, what we called it in the military. And it's a good thing for police officers too, right? If we ride around the city, we're out scanning the things around us, trying to identify crime that's afoot. Well, anybody can do that. And that's something that you could consider, trying to improve on. In addition to that, though, what you're talking about, the misidentification, often when officers are responding, we get limited information about a crime that's occurred. So it is not uncommon for an officer to stop someone and ask them questions and try to rule them out as a possible person involved in a crime, or to find evidence that they were involved in the crime. So in the event that you're stopped by an officer who wants to ask you questions, I'll tell you what, earlier we asked, how would you tell us that you are deaf? And pretty much when I looked across the room, every indication I saw was a clear communication to me. Now, Chief has mentioned that we'll talk to our officers and make sure that it's something that they're aware of. And it's something that I think we continue our training all the time to try and improve as officers. But that's something I'm going to take back to my squad today. So, you communicate to us that you are deaf or hard of hearing, and then we will break out our notebooks. I mean, most of our officers carry notebooks, and we'll try to write back and forth. The situation that Juan had was very unfortunate with, the second barrier with English being a second language. We actually have more, I talked to dispatch yesterday, we have more dispatchers who can sign than we do who speak Spanish. So that's another outlet we have. But the language line allows us to communicate with Spanish speakers. So it's something that we would have to work on building up and improving our ability to communicate, but with in the situation Juan had. But in general, and I have communicated several different investigations over the years with subjects, and we just wrote back and forth. So that would be, and we would, obviously, if we responded to a robbery at a gas station and you were there, I would ask that you stay and tell us what you did or didn't see. And in your case where you didn't see anything, that would just be added to our report.
Okay, great, thank you. I have another one, if it's okay, Gideon. This is Gideon, yes. We'll entertain one more and then go to the next person.
Okay, let's say you're in a mall, you're walking around, and the police tries to stop you verbally by calling out to you. Would a police, if you didn't respond, attack you or in some way take you down forcefully, or would they come up and speak to you and tap you on the shoulder? How would they respond if the person was not reacting to their verbal command?
You want that one, Chief? You want it?
Yes, you know what, and that's also situational, to where if you're just walking in the mall and you fit the description of somebody that we may want to speak with, they should come up to you and talk to you, not just use force on you for no reason, okay? Now, I want to go back to his scenario of the armed robbery. Can I do that?
This is Gideon, yes.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, so let's make it a little bit more complex. Let's say an armed robbery takes place at a gas station. You get in your car and you drive away. And the dispatch message comes out to the police that the robber is in a white Chevy Impala. And you just happen to be driving a white Chevy Impala. White guy in an Impala. Just did an armed robbery. The officers are going to try to stop your car because you fit the description. Okay?
Yeah,
Right?
that may happen.
It can happen. That's the part that worries me, because when they do a felony traffic stop, they don't walk up to your car. Okay? All communication is done from their car to your car. So that communication, however we're going to communicate, whether it's touching the ear or whatever we're going to do to know that you're deaf, is going to be a critical, important part of that stop. You see? And if you start moving around in your car to get something to communicate, the officer's going to say, what's he reaching for? Or what is she reaching for?
That's a tough one.
Yes, see?
Now, can I add something to that?
This is Gideon. I wanted to thank him. Actually, just a quick thing to add. You had said that if you're radioing from your car, or you don't actually walk up to the person you pulled over their vehicle, I'm wondering, in that instance, if I can roll down my window and maybe stick this card outside the window. Is that a possibility to be able to communicate with you all? Because they might, I might be afraid that I may roll down a window, stick that card out the window, and next thing I know, I'm getting shot.
All right, hold up there. All right. Yes, he showed you this driver communication card. Now, what about the license, your tag on your car? That could let you know that could be an indicator the person's deaf. So that would be something that could come in handy.
And can I make it even more complex for you? Even though you have the registration that lets us know that you're deaf, even though that you have the card, the officer will still be suspicious, because there are people out there that'll try to fool the officer. So we're working in a very dynamic situation, okay? And it takes good communication on both parts. And as Lieutenant Kellum and Sergeant Silent both said, and the panel will agree, our nonverbals are the biggest thing, that we can see how each other's acting during that stop. It's very important. Very, very important.
One thing I'd like to add too, just remember, if you are stopped or pulled over, time is on your side. Just relax, first of all, and make sure that we're understanding what you're saying before you move on to the next thing. So what I would say is just relax and let's get through it.
Good point.
Patience on both sides.
Patience on both sides.
If I could add, we do train and have been training for some time at the college. I help teach traffic stops. Well, during those scenarios at the college, we do run scenarios involving drivers that are deaf. So in the event they have to do as Chief mentioned, a known risk stop, and they don't get a reaction, don't get a response, or the person does not get out of the car, it's not the end of the world. The officer is trained to take the next step, to safely be able to move around that and understand that may be a part of the scenario, that there's an issue with communication. So in that event, they're not going to just go crazy and go violent and all this other stuff. They're trained to safely move up to the vehicle if there's no communication ever established. So there is training, and it has been in place for some time to make sure that's done safely.
So, to follow up, a little more clarification, and just in some of the conversations I've heard in the past in similar forums, do you, and with deaf persons wanting to know, if someone's pulled over, regardless of deaf or hearing, is it best to just kind of sit calmly and not try to be frozen, but like you mentioned, if there's a lot of movement and the police officers, however far behind, and they're running the tags and doing whatever they do, is there anything additional anyone can speak on that about best behavior for a driver that's been pulled over? For safety?
Hands on the steering wheel. Right. If at night, maybe turn on the dome light so the officer can see in the car. That helps, okay? Those things help. So that you see the blue lights in your mirror, it's at night, and you pull over. Right when you pull over, just turn on that dome light. Don't wait and then turn it on a minute later. Turn it on right when you pull over, you put the car in park, turn on that dome light. If you have tinted windows in the car, put the windows down so the officer can see in. That takes away the suspicion from the officer, okay? Because unfortunately in our country, traffic stops are a very dangerous situation for law enforcement, and a lot of officers are killed, okay, from those traffic stops. So we just want to make sure everybody is safe during that time.
This is Gideon. Wow. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Do we have any other questions? Yes, we'll go here and then over to my left.
Yes, this is Jeff Flaxgrid. I'm in Brunswick County. I don't live here, but anyway, I wanted to bring up a scenario. I have a few questions, but you are right about the communication card. I have that. Actually ordered mine recently, or got mine back in the spring. I got 2 of them. They're little communication cards, and it's got communication with my license and registration. That was a good way for me, and that's what I have here. I have the exact thing, because if a police officer pulls me over, I have the card on one side, and you guys would have your license and registration. You hang it on the outside of your door. The police officer can see that as they walk up. Am I right? I think you guys may have seen that before. And then that's one thing I wanted to throw out there. And the second one was something I was thinking about, was what I have seen. I've seen these vote for whoever, these little signs on the side of the road. I didn't know if it was high priority for people who were in patrol, or all of those people. If often when I go and I see them and go to different cities, I do see these signs that say vote for whoever. And politicians, like they've got like the signs like vote for the sheriff. How does that work?
This is Gideon. Is that person over the whole jurisdiction, or how does that relate when you see the nominees or the candidates running for office, and you see those signs outside? Do they have certain jurisdictions that they're going to be responsible for?
Yes. Usually if a person's running for sheriff, it'll say the name, and it'll say vote for sheriff. It'll tell you what position they're going for. Or it'll have a name and say for Senate or for Congress. Or if it's for a city councilman, somebody running, it'll say what ward they belong to or what district. Thank you, Jeff.
And this is Gideon. In that office, they would basically be the oversight for the Jacksonville Police Department, correct? That sheriff?
If it was a council person, a councilman or councilwoman who was running, they would be part of the city council for the city. And the manager, the city manager, is who we're really responsible to. And the council speaks through the manager to us. Now, we're responsible to everybody, every citizen, okay? We're a servant of the citizens. That's who we work for. We report to, in the chain of command or a hierarchy, through our chief of police, our city manager, and our council.
This is Gideon. Okay. Jeff, are you content with the answer?
Yes, I'd seen that a few times, and I just wondered how that worked. If the purpose of that was for them to run for their area, like Democrat, XYZ, sheriff of such and such a place. I didn't know if they were in charge of the whole city and other officers, or who they were running for, highway patrol, sheriff, or deputy. I didn't know if they would be serving in that same county, right? Just in that same county.
Correct. Right.
And who they would report to. So thank you.
Yes.
This is Gideon. Fantastic. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, one more question, and I see one person I wanted to talk about. I don't remember the name, but what if the person, you've seen people who have fooled those who are deaf, fooled police officers, and like, for example, I've been to a place where they've had people who were deaf come and communicate, and we found that the person in the store that was, needed assistance, they ended up not being deaf. And so when we go up to them and they say, how can we help you? There are some people who are frustrated because we know that they can communicate, but they know that they're pretending to be deaf. So I see that happening everywhere. I think that happens not just in a traffic stop, but other places. I, as a deaf person, don't like that, but yes, I have seen that in other places.
Yes.
This is Gideon. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, yes. Do we have a question over here to my left? Okay.
Try to ask a question like that.
After she's finished, you can come up.
Hello. My name is Tony. What if a person is dangerous or a stalker and they ask you, where do you live? What do you do? Like, they're stalking you. What do you do in the case of a stalker?
You're answering this one.
That's right up your alley, especially.
This is Gideon. So you're trying to figure out how you can prevent or report the person who's stalking you, correct?
Yes.
This is Gideon. Could anybody answer her question, what to do in case of a stalker?
You could go to the magistrate's office and get a restraining order. Is that what you're referring to, that type of situation?
This is Gideon, a restraining order. Do you know what the restraining order is? And this is Gideon. If you could elaborate on what a restraining order is, that would be fantastic.
It would be a document that would order the person that's stalking you to stay away from you, that they can't come to places that you may be at, or places that you may, like your job, school if you go to school, or your child's school if you have children in common, any area where you could be at.
Meaning they can't come to that location.
Correct.
And this is Gideon, yes, right. They couldn't come to your home or various places.
And another thing I wanted to ask, these are things that have happened while I've been driving at night. And there are police officers that stopped right in front of me. I thought, what in the world's going on? There are police officers everywhere. And they came to my car. I had no idea what in the world happened. I found out that there was a police that had had received dispatch saying that I robbed someplace that I was not even at. Yikes. And it come to find out that they had made a mistake, but it scared me half to death. I almost panicked.
This is Gideon, meaning that, and they had just mentioned, the panelists had mentioned, that you happen to match the description of another car.
Right. We have the same car.
So this is Gideon. So that situation did, in fact, already happen.
Yes, exactly. I had no idea what happened. They stopped me in my tracks, and I did say, I can't hear. I pointed to my ears. That's exactly what happened to me.
This is Gideon. Great. Thank you very much.
I just want to know what they did once he
I was
told.
gonna say.
Once, yeah, you didn't finish the story.
Gideon.
I need to know, once you did that, what did they do? Police, what did they do?
This is Gideon. If you could elaborate on the situation and what happened.
Yes, they dispatched. Hold on, let me move up here. Okay. All right, this is Tony. Yeah, they dispatched back, and I told them I couldn't hear, and they found out that I was deaf. And then the chief or whoever they were talking to said, "No, this is not a person. They just have the same car." So that's what they figured out.
So the store attendant, they identified that the person was in fact not deaf. So it was a misidentification.
Thank
Everything
you.
turned out well.
Very good. Very good. Thank God. See?
Okay, yes. We'll go here and then someone in the back.
All right, I'm a little nervous, so bear with me.
This is Gideon. We had a good question from the audience member. Now, this situation that happened with you, Tony, where the police officers came out, did the police officers tell you why they pulled you over or responded to you? Or did you, in fact, kind of envision or knew about the situation? How did you know what was going on?
Okay, yeah. I told them I was deaf, and they told the people back at the office that I were deaf, and they said, "Sorry, excuse us, you can go home."
This is Gideon. So you had no idea of that situation, and then later on, you had realized what in fact occurred and what the situation was.
Exactly.
And when did that happen? Did that happen recently or a while ago?
This was a couple of years ago. It didn't have anything to do with me because I'm not a criminal.
This is Gideon. Thank you very much. All right, thank you. Thank you. Wow. Okay, yes.
Now.
I don't even
Okay,
know.
again, I'm sorry, I'm nervous. Hi, my name is Sheila, and I live not here in Jacksonville. I live in another county not far from here, about 18 miles away. But anyway, I did want to say something. Sorry, I'm nervous, so let me get my thoughts together. All right. My mother worries about me because I'm deaf. I live in the country. And my mom is constantly a worrywart. She worries about me living in a house with her grandchildren. And I said, you know what? I just got to keep the faith. I tell Mom not to worry about me. I do just fine. But Mother still worries. She calls me all the time. I tell her, you call me too much, Mom. She worries because I live in the country, because she has heard there are a lot of break-ins and people are being robbed, especially this time of year. And I told her, Mom, I got my baseball bat beside my bed, and I have something by the front door. Got my ball bat by the front door. And sometimes, I got the kid's BB gun. I got to put that to the side, though. But anyway, Mom told me, she said, we need to go to the sheriff's office and fill out this paperwork for you to get your license so you can get your concealed carry. I said, I don't want that. My mom said, you need to because you never know what's going to happen. So I went to the sheriff's office, filled out some paperwork, got a license, and Mom bought me a gun. I said, Mama, I don't even want this. I hate having a gun. Can't even do that. She said, please buy a gun. So I decided to get a stun gun that I carry with me. I actually have it. And now, this isn't funny. Y'all don't laugh at me now. But anyway, I used tools. I have like a tool in my car, like a screwdriver. And so if somebody tries to hurt me or rape me or whatever, rob me, then I have that right there. I can hit them, stab them, whatever I can do. But I have this stun gun with me. And that's a way that my mom can be safe. So she's not that worried as much as she would, but she's right. The country is kind of unsafe at times, but she worries a lot about me being in the country. And she, I know that living in the country can be kind of dangerous, but she just kept getting, she kept wanting me to have this concealed carry, and I know she's going to worry anyway, but that is something I did get. So that might be something you guys need to get. That might be a way that you guys can keep yourselves safe. Please do that. Please fill out something to, if you need to get a gun. My mom told me I wasn't ready to get a gun, but I at least got something. And I got my screwdriver in the car, so keep your tools with you.
This is Gideon. Okay. As she just mentioned, she mentioned various items that she can keep herself safe. Is there anything that you would say to her not to have on herself, like maybe indicate to her that a screwdriver or something, a stun gun or something of that sort would not be good to have to utilize for safety?
People in the audience are saying pepper spray.
Pepper spray is good. There are some of those things that she mentioned that if you carry, there are North Carolina general statutes that so a stun gun is considered a concealed weapon. So you would have to be permitted to carry a stun gun concealed about your person. The same with certain length derricks, daggers, knives, things like that. Certain length fixed blade knives can't be carried concealed. So those are all things that you want to, before you start carrying weapons like that, you want to check up on the laws regarding carrying certain weapons. I believe everybody, North Carolina has concealed carry laws. It's definitely I would say a state that supports gun ownership by its citizens. And I feel the same way. I just encourage you to do it legally. So go and, see the sheriff in your county where you live. If it's here in Onslow County, go see the sheriff about pistol purchase permits, concealed carry permits. And you have to attend training to carry concealed. And some of that training will teach you that if you are carrying concealed, you have to notify law enforcement. So that's another one of those things. If you fail to notify, in other words, during a traffic stop, if you're pulled over, you have a concealed carry on your person, you have to notify law enforcement that you're carrying concealed. It's just one of those safety things for all of us, right?
This is Gideon. Thank you so much. And I believe someone over here has a question.
One more thing before you do. The reason I have it carrying with me, and I got my permit, was something that I could have when I travel and something for me to have to protect me when I'm at home. It's not something I carry with me. I have something either in my purse or in my glove box while I'm traveling. That way I'm not finding myself stuck in a dangerous situation while I'm away from home. And, I always make sure that I keep the permit with me because I don't want to be caught without that in case something happens. So I do have those with me
We have about
when I'm at home or traveling.
15. We have about 15 minutes left, so I think we're gonna move on. I know Gideon, and then next, I think Deborah Wolf has had her hand up for a while. Okay, and then
Okay, that's fine.
we'll probably need to wrap up.
Okay, hold on one second. All right, great. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you guys for all you do. We appreciate it. My name is Eric Hillard, and I have been a Jacksonville resident for many years. I have two concerns. One of them is I do have heart problems. I've had 2 heart surgeries, and I know another person, at least one other person, that has a heart issue. I won't name names because it's not my place to say, but you guys don't have a 24-hour interpreting service, like you said. So how many of you or the Jacksonville Police Department do know sign language that are available at least during the times when you're in hours 8 to 5?
We have none. We have 2 that are communicators, but they can't come out and give a legal type of interpretation. So as far as I know, as patrol officers, we have none. 0. In patrol.
Okay, well, that brings up my next question. If somebody has to call 911 for me, who does have a heart issue, and I'm laying out on the floor, and I need to sign and communicate, y'all will be the first people to get there. So as the first responder, how does that work? How do you solve that issue?
It'll be life and death.
and it's a
Yeah.
life or death situation.
Well, hopefully we'll get out there when we get out there. And if we diagnose you or see who's ever going to be, is the person with you that called, are they also deaf?
They might be.
They might be, right? And go ahead.
And whether they're deaf or hearing, the person may not know everything that I know or am feeling. And I'm trying to communicate for myself. What if the person who's with me doesn't know sign language and doesn't really know very much about my situation? What do you do?
So what would be very helpful for us, and they have them because I wear one, is a bracelet that has the information inside of what my ailment is, whether it's heart. For me, I wear one because I'm allergic to certain medications. Should I have a heart attack and they want to give me something, that'll tell them, don't give me that medicine because that'll hurt me. So there are certain ID bracelets that you can wear that's private for you, but we'll look and see that bracelet and have that information. Or EMS, Emergency Medical Services, the ambulance or the fire department will be able to look and tell and assist you, even though they can't talk with you.
All right, and then I do have one more thing. You were talking about, since you don't have an interpreter for a traffic stop, or if something happens in Jacksonville, incident in Jacksonville, and there is no interpreter, and you're saying you want to write back and forth with this person, I want to make sure that it is understood that some people who are deaf, and like I said, I'm not pointing out anyone here, everyone writes differently. And it's going to test your patience, maybe. If you write differently, how do you resolve that if there is an issue and there's no interpreter available and the writing is not legible or easily understood?
See, for me, I can deal with that because I've done that with my brother, to where his writing is different and I recognize that. But for police officers, that's going to take us to have training. And you're exactly right. And I think Lieutenant Kellum and Sergeant Silence both said it's going to take us to have patience. There's no rush on a traffic stop to rush through it. We have time. Okay?
Another thing too, if you have a smartphone and you have like a notepad app, text it on there instead of writing it if your writing is not legible.
Right, but you've got two ways of writing here. You've got some people who sign in English, some who sign in American Sign Language, which is two different forms of sign language. And both types of individuals will write differently. So I suggest you learn both, or what you're going to expect, so that way you can communicate better with us in the community.
Can I say something to that too? And this is why that's important. I didn't know people write different like that. So for us to get training in that is to see exactly what that writing looks like, so we could know that we're going to come upon that when we pull somebody who is deaf. We may face that situation. I've never heard of that before.
It's actually good training.
That's good training for us to have. So my question to you, is there a document or training that we can get that teaches us that writing that you might know of?
I'm not entirely sure how to find that information. Maybe the division that Christina works for can help.
This is Christina. That is part of what we do as a division. We provide training to a wide variety of different agencies, whether it's hospitals, healthcare providers, but we do also focus on working with our emergency responders. So we have done a lot with, the Wilmington Fire Department and different agencies, and we would be more than happy to work with you as far as training all the officers, and then also working with some of the upper level folks and looking at policies and making sure that things are in place for the boots on the ground to know what to do in those situations. So
That's
we would be
awesome.
more than happy. If I also might add or ask, I think this might be a question for Mr. McAllister. With 911, obviously for Jacksonville, or if in Onslow County, I know some other counties say that you can do this, that any individual can either call in or fill out a form or whatever and let you know, hey, I guess it would be registered to the address, but at this address, there's, a person with a seizure disorder, or at this address, there's a person who is deaf, or so that if any first responder is needing to go to that home address and they have that information, that might help them know in advance to be prepared for whatever they're arriving to. Is that?
We do have that. The biggest one that we deal with is called Hasten Systems. Hastens, Hastens. They are, I guess you register through them and then they report to us any type of conditions that you have, stuff like that. And we can actually put it in our computer. Now, if you were to actually give us permission or you wanted us to put it into our computer under our alerting system, we can do that. But like I said, most of our stuff comes through like Hastings systems and they handle it. And then we have our Are You OK program, which we would send a community officer out to you and they would meet with you and find out any type of special needs that you have or any type of relatives that you would have if you were to have that heart attack that we may need to call. And then this system would actually call you on a daily basis to see that you are okay. And that, we could put that information into our computer system that way as well. So that way the responders are aware.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to sit down and hush so that Deborah can come up and speak.
Thank you.
Okay.
This is Gideon. If we could have
Oh,
Deborah go first. Okay, thank you.
okay.
Hi, my name is Martha, and I've been here. I actually moved from Morganton, North Carolina with my husband. My husband grew up here. His name is Matthew. He's deaf. He's actually here. He actually grew up from here. He's a business owner. He works in construction with roofing. A couple different situations. I wanted to ask you guys what you think. I know, in state government, you have people who want to go hunting. My husband does frequently hunt. I don't. He and I are deaf and we have children who can hear. But by law, parents must keep their guns in a safe. And my kids, because we can't hear, our kids are protected. So we can hear if they're trying to get through that, get into the gun case. So we do have that, and he has a license for hunting. But the question is, how does that work? Because some of the hunting licenses that you get, they may not have the person's name. You go in the store and they look and check to see the person's history, their criminal record, and they're not allowed to purchase guns. So how does that work with concealed carry?
This is Gideon. Let me clarify. So what are you asking exactly?
Okay, so let's say with criminals, would they know? Would they be able to? Do they have any documentation that they have to have in order to get licensure or a permit?
This is Gideon. So you're wondering if any of the retail shops or the gun stores have a list of names and somebody who was into some criminal activity came in, or the gun stores, would they sell or distribute those guns to those criminals? So you're asking if they're aware of any criminals that come in to purchase a gun?
Firearms?
Yeah, firearms.
Now, is the question, forgive me, is that question focused on the hunting license or the actual purchase of firearms?
Just in general, I would say, and a purchase of firearms, purchase of firearms.
The purchase of firearms, they have to be cleared first, and somebody, not so much in that store, in that business, will actually do a background check, and it takes some time for that to come back. And that's why a purchase permit, it allows you to purchase. At the same time, there's also a carry concealed permit, which is completely different, but both are required to have a background permit completed before they can purchase or carry a weapon.
That's only handguns, though. There's an instant background check for long guns, like you're talking hunting rifles. Mm-hmm. So if you go to, for instance, Dick's Sporting Goods, if you go to Dick's Sporting Goods and purchase a rifle to go hunting, you have to fill out a form. You have to provide your ID, a state ID, and then you provide that to the person. They actually go over and punch it into a little computer, and they get an instant check back from the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Now it's Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. But they get an instant check back saying that you don't have any current criminal charges. You're not a convicted felon or not a prohibited person from purchasing a firearm. Now that's the instant background check. It's not nearly as thorough as what's necessary for purchasing a pistol. So you buy a pistol purchase permit, you have to go to the sheriff who issues those permits. And he does a background check just like a criminal investigator. You know, one of his detectives basically makes some phone calls on the names you list and checks you have to provide them with a criminal history and those things. And then the concealed carry permit, which Sergeant Silence mentioned is even deeper than that. It requires a training class and more in-depth background check. And then with that, you can actually purchase firearms without going each time to do a pistol purchase permit.
All right, thank you. My last question is, I'm near an area where there was the missing 3-year-old. My house is actually near where that little girl lives. I'm near that area. And they are still doing the search for her. How long does something like that usually take when you're looking for missing persons? Because in my area, there are a lot of cops circulating the area.
That's situational. It just depends on the circumstances of the case. I can't say that for any one missing person, we are going to give it so much time. Obviously, that's not our case. These are all city representatives here. That's a county investigation. But I know that if the same situation happened here in the city, I can't give you a definite answer that for a missing 5-year-old, we're going to give it so much time. It just depends on the circumstances of the case.
So it is different. So it's not the same in county as it is out of the city, or in the city versus in the county.
Every investigation is different. And this is a juvenile investigator. She may want to add some of it to it. She deals with missing children on a regular basis.
This is Gideon. Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Did you want to add anything, Detective?
I mean, it's like he said, every situation is different. We don't put a timeline on it and say we're only going to look for X amount of time. It just depends on the case. It depends on all of the circumstances involved to determine how much time we're going to spend looking. But when it comes to a child, chances are the time is going to be exponentially longer than as with an adult type thing.
This is Gideon. Thank you. Do we have time for one more?
I think for one more, and then I think what I'd like to do is hand it back over to the panel to see if they have any, or Deputy Chief Multifano, if they have any final comments, closing comments or thoughts. Okay.
This is Gideon. Yes. Let's, Deborah.
Okay. Hi, my name is Deborah Wolf. I'm in Cumberland County, from Cumberland County, down the road. So, hello. I wanted to ask about communication access and handcuffing. How does that work? Do you arrest a person behind their back or in front? Is there a law that has been passed for people who are deaf who are arrested?
That's an interesting question. Detective Silence, or Sergeant Silence and I both teach handcuffing, and that's not a consideration I've had in the past because for safety purposes, we handcuff in the back. Because if you handcuff me in the front, I can still access everything on my belt. I can access weapons and tools and injure someone. But something I've not considered is if I handcuff someone who's deaf or hard of, how are you going to communicate, right? Is that your concern?
Now, if I can actually, We've actually discussed this
Right.
about a year and a half
For someone
ago.
who is deaf or hard of hearing, maybe they need to write or communicate that way. Maybe even writing, you need to be able to have your hands, because there's nothing we can do communication-wise if our hands are behind our back.
There was the situation we've discussed. In most cases, when you're handcuffed, you're actually under arrest. So at that point, I would say that that's not the time for an interview or discussion. That's often why you're normally being transported or trying to figure out what's going on, maybe. When it comes to the time for us to communicate with you, of course, we would make sure that you could communicate and we would have someone that is both legal and certified to be able to communicate, because at that point, it becomes a legal issue and everything you say and do can be used against you in court. So I would say don't take that as us trying to keep you from communicating. It's more so trying to keep us safe.
Just waiting for the interpreter to finish up.
Okay, great. Okay, yeah, that answers my question.
This is Gideon. Wondered if we had any more questions from the audience. Yes, you have a question? Okay, that's fine. What is your question?
Okay, I just want to ask, and I have grandchildren, and I have a video phone. The video phone stays on, and I can communicate. I have grandchildren that push the buttons, and they called 911. And I had a police officer that the next day had actually contacted me, and the police officer came to my house, and I said, why is the police officer here? I said, I'm deaf. He said, you're deaf. I can't hear. Okay. And he said, do you have children? Is something wrong? Did something happen? And I said, did they? Something happened? I said, no, thank you. There's nothing wrong. And it turns out that my grandchildren were playing with the phone. I said, do not touch my phone ever again. And the next day, my son, who is in the Marines, he was ticked off when he found out because he was in the war for 30 years. He knew sign language. And so my son thought it was the TV. He got the remote, thought it was the remote, thought it was for the TV, and started communicating. And he said, are you deaf? He said, no, I'm going to go to my room. So I guess the reason why I have a smaller phone is just to have access to 911, and so that people do know that I am deaf. Sometimes, there are hard of hearing people who also use this. I'm a little nervous, and sometimes I kind of feel old using the equipment, but after having the new relay service, all these things that I'm hearing tonight, arrests and how people know whether they're, approaching someone deaf or hearing, how do you ID a person who's deaf?
So, I think we talked about that some tonight, about a few different times, about the different things that you feel pretty savvy of. It's more about how do all you let someone know you're deaf, and you feel pretty comfortable. Do you have, Gideon, do you have any final thoughts, or anyone from the panel would like to have any closing comments? And then we can have some time for refreshments in the lobby, and also more time for one-on-one conversations. You all will still be here, right? Okay, so.
This is Gideon. Not at this moment. I can't think of anything. I'm pretty content with everything that's gone on. I'm not sure if anyone else has anything to add.
Okay.
Do you have a question or a comment?
All right. I went shopping and I saw two guys driving by slowly while I was walking, and I felt very odd. And the guy said, please give me your ID. And I said, for what? I don't trust you. I don't know you because you look like a stranger to me. I told them, hell no, and I took off.
Safe way to be.
This is Gideon. Oh, that's good.
Well, thank you.
This is Gideon. I actually just thought of something. I'm just wondering if any of the individuals at the panelists, or any of the panelists or police officers, have unmarked cars. I know that Chief Malfitano has one. Does anyone else have cars that are not identified? And how do you know which vehicles can pull over an individual if it's identified or unidentified vehicles?
That's a great question. And let me tell you what happens there. So, like in my particular car, I don't have it outfitted with a bunch of lights. I have one switch with just some lights in the car. But here's something I was thinking about earlier during traffic stops. Unfortunately, we have people who like to impersonate police officers. Okay? They can buy a blue light and put it in their car, and they can turn it on, and they can stop cars, or they can try to. Okay? And usually, what we tell people to do in that situation is to call dispatch and say, do you have a car that looks like this in this area right now? Stopping people. And dispatch would be able to tell you that. But in your situation, you'd have to go to a relay service. And that relay service would have to go ahead and let us know. So the advice I could give, and correct me if I'm wrong, Paddle, is if that happens to you, and you have a car that's not a marked patrol car, lights on top, the color of the car, siren, which, that's not going to matter because it doesn't have the vibration that you need, but it's a marked patrol car with lights. If you can, and you're not sure, call that relay service and let them know you're being stopped so they can call the dispatch center and ask if we have a car stopping you. That's if you're in our city. Okay? That's what we would ask that you do.
I'd like to add something to that too, kind of from the point of view of the officer. I would ask too that you slow down,
Right.
turn on your turn signal so that flashers, so the officer knows that you've recognized that you're attempting to pull him over. I know after some recent events, it seems that some people are a little slower to stop for law enforcement. And look at it from the police officer's point of view. If that goes on for a long period of time while you're trying to make contact with the relay service and do these things, it could lead the officer to believe that you are refusing to stop for them and maybe trying to, flee or cause some or commit some other criminal act, hiding contraband, something like that. So I would encourage you to slow down, turn on your turn signal, look for that lighted parking lot, something like that to help protect yourself from the suspicious person or the person opposing as law enforcement.
In that same vein, and you just kind of touched on it, but either within the city or even probably more out like in the country or some of the
Right.
rural areas, which maybe you can't speak to, but is it okay to, especially at night, to drive to an area that's more either public or well-lit
Yes.
or?
Yes.
But
Yes, absolutely. I encourage, I'm good with that, but I would definitely caution that you turn on your signal to show the officer that your intent is to pull over, especially, someone mentioned Highway 53. Highway 53, especially out towards Maple Hill, has narrow shoulders. It's kind of an ugly place to pull over. I've stopped cars out there before. It's a hard place to stop a car and find enough shoulder to even contact the driver. So I definitely understand that would be of concern. Turn on your signal, drive until you have that lighted space, and then turn over or pull over.
And if I can add to that, police officers will more times than not try to pull people over in well-lit areas. They try to pick that place just for that reason, to make everybody feel safe. So you'll kind of know, you'll get the feeling and you'll know if it's just like a Volkswagen with a blue light trying to stop you, right? Something like that, to kind of set those bells and whistles off. Let me call the relay service and find out what's going on here.
Okay, my question's about medication, and I know there are a lot of people who have issues with medication. For instance, like taking more than 5 or 10 medications, and they have their medicine bottles with them, and they have their pill box with them. Okay, so they may have that with them while they're out traveling, and then when, let's say, a person gets pulled, thinking that the person, they get pulled in the car, ends up having to be searched. They may assume that they have the medication on their person, and then they could get held for that. And they're not trying to sell the drugs for any reason. They have them because they have a medical condition or several medical conditions that require that many medications be used. But sometimes they have no choice, because some people travel on a bus, and maybe carrying that many bottles is not comfortable for them. Some people I know have several issues that they have to, have issues all over where they need to have medication. They may think that I'm trying to sell medication. And, I didn't want to have to go to court. And, if something happens like that, there's that option where the police might be sued.
I think that one is one I would like to feel. I would caution against carrying your medications outside. We mentioned earlier that the opioid epidemic is one of the largest that's facing law enforcement right now. So with that, there are many, many people who are concealing, other types of medication in different types of containers, carrying medication illegally. And those are indicators. So if it's not in its original prescription bottle, that is an indicator. If there's multiple types of prescription medication in one prescription bottle, that's an indicator. Those are all things that lead us to believe, because we're looking for that now. We have to. Try to find those things to try to combat that epidemic. And so I would caution against taking your prescription medication. If you have to travel, if you're long distance traveling, then take all your medication bottles with you so that you have them, and that you can show that it's this medication that goes in this kind of bottle, and so on and so forth. And you'll see controlled substances, ones that are controlled by law and that you can be charged for having if you're not supposed to have them. They actually have a description on the bottle of the medication, and it says how many pills are supposed to be in there. Those are all indicators. So I would definitely caution against carrying your medication outside. Now, in your home, entirely different situation. If you mentioned traveling, if you're just running up to the store and then coming home, leave your medication at the house if you can. Again, medication is a target for thieves. So if you leave it in the open in your car, it's going to help make you a target for someone who wants to break into your car. So keep that in mind. And I would definitely caution against it.
One thing I just want to add to that. So I want to make you feel a little better with your medication that you're traveling with your pill bottles, with your pill box. Is that if you get stopped for speeding or running a stop sign, chances are your car is not going to be searched. If you're going to be asked to be searched, it would be for a valid reason, not just to be searched for the sake of being searched. Does she have that? She understands that?
Good to go.
Okay, this is Gideon. I would like to thank you. Time has run out. I would like to just wrap up, if I may. We had several great questions. We had several audience members ask questions, and finally we were able to get everyone here to the table and answer and entertain all these questions and comments. So thank you for that meaningful discussion, and thank you to the interpreters for all the communication access. Thank you for coming out And I believe Christina may want to add something in addition, so I'll turn it over to Christina.
Just again, thank you so much. This is the second major, I guess, event we've done with the Jacksonville Police Department. We really value your partnership, and I certainly think of you as an ally to the deaf and hard of hearing community. And I think the division, we will look forward to working with you further, talking about training or different things that we might be able to provide to you, and just continuing to grow this great community police relationship. So thank you so much for coming today, all of you, and your time. And I know one or two more hands were still going up, but at the time where we can have some refreshments and socialize, the interpreters will still be here. So you can grab one and grab the person and still have some time to ask a few more questions, all right? Thank you.